Revisiting early Danish modernism at the turn of the 19th century reveals an intrinsic ambiguity. A plethora of examples within the field of art, interior design, and architecture illustrate tensions and dilemmas embedded in the notion of the modern project. In the following, we shall briefly trace this diversity in expression, which should also become decisive for the modern breakthrough decades later. Let's start with a close look at the painting Portrait of Georg Jensen by Einar Nielsen from 1900, which is Design Museum Denmark's contribution to this wonderful exhibition. The focus of the painting is a sideways depiction of a man, completely absorbed in his own contemplative state. The surrounding space appears insignificant, a bare interior with very few details. Instead of elaborating on stuff and pieces, the focus is kept on the person, as if Einar Nielsen's artistic project would be materializing the state of mind of Georg Jensen. Einar Nielsen was a symbolistic painter. His motives revolved around sickness and disorder, death and life, loneliness and exclusion, religion and nature. His landscape paintings were imbued with deeper meanings, introvert spaces, even under open air in gentle undulating landscapes in central Jutland. Titles such as The Sick Girl, or And in His Eyes I Saw Death, or The Blind Girl, and Death and the Crippled demonstrate how Nielsen regarded the world. And it's quite obvious that what counts here is Georg Jensen's inner state of mind, a man radiating at once fragility, sensitivity, and an intense gaze, even though the viewer is never having direct contact with him, strong and focused. To his right, a classic amphora is a single element that breaks the principle of emptiness. The amphora refers to a status of maker with ceramic as a preferred material and media, and it refers to the rich history and craft tradition dating thousands of years back. The minimalistic interior which surrounds Georg Jensen is quite unusual for the time, being the heydays for the Victorian style, the preferred interior decoration style, international and eclectic in its scope, as we just heard from Michel Farros as well. The so-called klunkehjem. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Everything is, yeah. I'll try to keep away from this magic thing. The so-called klunkehjem, part of the National Museum's collection in Copenhagen, is a unique and complete high society apartment from the late 1890s. It gives us a fairly good impression of how a stylish home was considered. Plenty of furniture, especially the upholstered kind, draped textiles, heavy carpets and curtains, paintings all over, sculptures, souvenirs, and all sorts of decorative elements. Altogether an almost claustrophobic feeling, but marking social status. In 1900, when Nielsen painted the portrait, Jensen had his own ceramic workshop, and his ceramics had been exhibited in Paris at the World Fair, where the Art Nouveau had its glory days. He was trained as a goldsmith and had attended the Royal Academy of Fine Art as a sculptor. He wanted to pursue a career as an artist, but in the beginning without much success. The real breakthrough came when he established his silversmith workshop in 1904 and showed new directions within the industrial art. In line with Art Nouveau, the Georg Jensen style soon gained fame, with exquisite pieces of silver uniting the ideal of relatively cheap products with uncompromising artistic quality. It was a time of transition, turn of the century, a farewell to the well-known and a welcome to the new and never seen, a both and, which in Denmark spanned from a dedicated excitement generated from all modern to an almost introvert, regressive and worried attitude as awaiting an inevitable catastrophe. Around 1900, the ornament more or less invaded the agenda all over Europe. It was pervasive. They wrote about it, they debated the status of ornament, and not at least it was highly conspicuous in art, decorative art, and crafts. In 1901, Belgic Henry van der Velde published an essay with a straightforward title, The New Ornament. Velde argued for a modern and abstract ornament, epitomizing the spirit of a new epoch. And this modern ornament was investigated in many different ways within the framework of emerging currents like Art Nouveau, Jugendstil, Secessionist, and the Glasgow School. In a few and highly dynamic years, arabesques, curving lines, floral motifs, and an organic ornamentation could be traced through numerous beautiful, artistically created works. The inspiration came from the arts and craft movement, where William Morris and his like, from the last half of the 19th century, had contributed substantially to rethink the relation between art with a capital A and craft. At a historical moment where industrialization gained a massive foothold, it was even more important to heighten the quality in the industrial production. The notion of the decorative as something divergent from overloaded, elaborate, and exuberant adornments was new and somehow anticipated the forthcoming tendencies. The same could be seen in Denmark in spite of differences. The notion of the decorative was highly influential, as in the new movement Skønvirke, introduced by architect Caspar Lønning Borch in 1907. Skønvirke consists of two Danish words, skøn, which means beautiful, and virke, which could be translated as work or activity. But it was more than this, because the idea of work and activity in this case was imbued with a higher mission, like a vocation. Georg Jensen's work enthused in Denmark as well as abroad. It showed new ways for silver crafting. Very much in line with the Danish tradition, the artistic impression was a low-key, quite modest version of the more exuberant French Art Nouveau. Regarding the sense of materials, Georg Jensen also pointed in new directions. Instead of shining, polished surfaces, he aimed at a more natural, organic expression. The hammer left marks in his work, and the result was a brimming surface where the light was gently refracted in many angles at one time. He wanted to produce the moonlight sheen, as he expressed it himself. He also used patination, which allowed the silver to appear in a multitude of different nuances, spanning from light to dark tones. And he drew heavily on inspiration from nature, the world of flora and fauna, including insects, as we see here. Jensen was not the only one who made the journey from ceramic experiments to silver works. Svend Hammershøi, the brother of the well-known painter Wilhelm Hammershøi, took his starting point in clay and worked out models of jars, bowls, cups, and the like, which was subsequently transposed to silver. The beautiful St. Margaret bowl is adorned with a delicate leafage ornament, which should become a recurring theme in Svend Hammershøi's work. In this case, it's a bay leaves decoration composed by layers of leaves, one upon another, creating a dense, powerful, and effective expression. And some years after, it was honored with a gold medal at the Exposition des Arts Décoratifs Modernes in Paris, 1925. Svend Hammershøi's ceramic oeuvre had been very much inspired by the breakthroughs of Thorvald Bindesbøll, whose often large-scale objects was characterized by an expression completely liberated from the straitjacket of earlier time. Organic lines, forms, and the contrastful interplay with a whiff of Japonism pointed in new directions. In 1905, Copenhagen inaugurated a new town hall. The building turned out to be an architectonic masterpiece where even the slightest details was designed due to a master plan. It was a grand-scale Gesamtkunstwerk, and as such a major effort, a fine result of a collaborative venture. In the town hall, all the old Danish handicraft tradition had been revived. Mural paintings inspired by the Danish medieval village church went hand in hand with ingenious, artful brickwork and elaborate wrought iron structures. Copenhagen Town Hall was one gigantic, elaborate narrative. It told about history, nation, nature, flora and fauna, and how everything was closely intertwined through the power of crafting. The solid brick emerging from the Danish underground, granite from even the most remote parts of the Danish kingdom, and pictorial representations of animals and flowers from all over, including the northernmost parts of Greenland. It was nation building at the same time as it brought honor to almost forgotten professions of beautiful workmanship. And the interiors were highly ornamented all over and everywhere. As quite a contrast, Wilhelm Hammershøi's paintings exposed interiors stripped bare. In spite of being created in the same years, their austere simplicity spoke a completely different language. The grey, muted tonality evoked an intense feeling of absence and isolation. The favorite motifs of the paintings could be regarded as snapshots of everyday life, views from the interior, backstage views of a feminine universe, often with women depicted from their back, absorbed in their own world and thoughts. Sometimes even completely void interiors without any trace of human life, as in dust motes dancing in the sunbeams from 1900, as we see here. Interestingly, the emptiness is not without life, as this painting clearly demonstrates. In its own unobtrusive and discreet manner, it calls attention. It's beaming with life, and the sunshine casts a spell over the white and grey modulated surfaces, but not without a melancholic resonance. Hammershøi is interpreting home as a metaphysical space, and somehow Hammershøi's paintings anticipated the idiom of modernism. It was a straightforward, almost abstract approach to space. When Denmark finally became modern and functionalism was introduced in the late 1920s and early 1930s, it was never like a rupture or a dramatic break. It happened gradually, and this period of transition was rather gently modulated. From arts and craft and Art Nouveau to Skønvirke to Art Deco, there is a straight line. Danish modern was coined and acclaimed as an international phenomenon, and in the 1940s and 50s, modern design was to some extent equivalent with Danish design. The first half of the 20th century was an extremely rich and fruitful period in Danish craft and industrial art. Critics Sigurd Schulz summed it up in 1947, and in his analysis he focused on the fact that the changing and multiple, often ideological anchored currents bared witness of a truly diverse and contradictory field. From 1901, where Society for Decorative Arts was established via the Skønvirke movement, until the 20s and 30s, where the social engagement and commitment was a driving force. A recurrent theme was a battle between tradition and innovation. The designers were basically divided in two groups. The one having a systematic and analytical way of dealing with design process became the quintessence of the formalistic approach and the insistency of the handicraft tradition. And a notion of tradition which at the same time opted for the importance of a vivid tradition where well-known types and models were constantly transformed within a frame set by new needs and requirements. The other followed the ideology of a more contemporary and continental modernism of the interwar period, where the dream of the good life was closely related to the left-wing political agenda and where tradition was absolutely no-go. Inventiveness, the idea of the never-before-seen, and the urge to discover a whole new world for the first time penetrated the more radical modernists. A lot of new agendas, but at the same time a continuation of and an accentuation of the restrained and simplistic expressions which was in vogue in the first decades of the 20th century. The artistic development of Georg Jensen Company sort of spanned both through the first 50 years of the 20th century. Finally, one could ask what truly gained popularity and a strong foothold in the broader population. And I would like to wind up by this cartoon by the Danish illustrator Carl Jensen from 1943, which exemplifies the dilemma. With the title, An Architect Passes By, and the undertitle, Not Without Brutality, the young architects have decided to embellish the Danish homes. The cartoon indicates a rather tense relationship between the vanguards of the architects fighting against tradition. They wanted to introduce a more modern, up-to-date interior. They fought against the upholstered furniture, the carpets, table cover, knick-knack all over the place, things saturated with memories and all providing a cozy atmosphere that characterized the traditional Danish home as reminiscent of the Victorian age, or the klunkestil as it was named in Danish. As the cartoon unveils, the elderly couple living there really enjoys the intimate, familiar and personal look of the home. They are happily soaked in each favorite occupation, the husband smoking his elaborate meerschaum pipe, thinking about life, and his wife sitting in the rocking chair is a busy knitter. But there is a snake in Eden, and the perfect idol is not an everlasting one. From the left side, a young, efficient man appears, dressed to perfection to be recognized as an architect, with a little chapeau on his head, the check plifort and a raw sketch in his hand. The stage is set for the radical transformation of the home. The next illustration shows the new and architecturally improved home, reflecting the early 1940s and the ideal of a functionalist interior, an aesthetic stripped bare down to the basics. No carpets, no comforting textiles, everything shines pure and clean, ready to meeting the hygienic demands of the modern life. What meet our eyes seem to be iconic modern design, such as the famous pH lamps. Furniture and lighting are examples of the so-called good design, and so is the only painting on the wall, a reproduction of the famous Danish purist painter Wilhelm Lundstrøm, whose volumetric studies of the things from everyday life, such as jugs, bowls, vases, and the like, echoes the ethos of the functionalist architecture and design. The lush fan palm from the previous interior has been replaced by an almost stylistic paraphrase of the idea of a plant, an organic ornament adorning the wall. And the success of the piano seemed to be the modern wonder of technique, a radio set. The overall impression tends to be alienating, and the people living there obviously do not feel comfortable. Everything is minimized, even the pipe of the husband. It is a well-known fact that cartoons communicate with quite exaggerated and even grotesque means to make the message clear. In this case, however, it also reveals a substantial dilemma underlying the so-called Danish modern. Even though the myth of sleek and all-inclusive modernism was quite persistent in the second half of the 20th century, it never quite succeeded at bridging the gap between ideal and reality. Denmark tended to be a design society embracing everyone, but at the same time only the chosen few, the avant-garde, the elite being artists, architects and designers, among others, really hailed the modern design ideology. The main party was still in love with the traditional, stylish expressions when it came to decorating a home. The love of heavy upholstered furniture, lush decorations and objects connected to personal memory, as if the thought of sheer space made them uneasy. Thank you for your attention.